On our 5th wedding anniversary, I hid in the closet to surprise my husband. But someone else walked into the room and put her phone on speaker. What I heard next froze my blood. I had been planning this surprise for weeks. The silk negligee hidden in the back of my drawer. The champagne chilling in a small cooler I had smuggled into the master bedroom closet. The card I had written by hand, telling Mark how these 5 years had been the best of my life. How I couldn't imagine spending another 50 without him. I'm Chloe. I was 30 years old, and I thought I knew what love was. The closet was spacious, one of those walk-in designs that Mark had insisted on when we bought the house 3 years ago. "You deserve a closet where you can actually walk," he had said, kissing my forehead. "My queen deserves a palace." I remember laughing, telling him he was being ridiculous, that I didn't need all this space. But he insisted. He always insisted on giving me the best. Or so I thought. I had left work early that day, telling my assistant I had a migraine. In reality, my heart was pounding with excitement. I had stopped at the florist to pick up rose petals. At the bakery for a small 2-person cake with 5 years of forever, written in elegant cursive. I had arranged everything perfectly on our bed. The rose petals formed a heart. The cake sat on the nightstand. The champagne, the one I had brought, not the one that would later haunt my nightmares, was chilling beside it. And then I had hidden in the closet, leaving the door cracked just enough to see when Mark walked in. I checked my phone. It was 6:47 p.m. Mark usually got home around 7. I had maybe 15 minutes to wait. I adjusted my position on the small ottoman I had dragged into the closet, smoothed down my dress. I had changed into the red one he loved, the one that hugged my curves in all the places his eyes always lingered, and practiced my smile. "Surprise, baby," I whispered to myself. "Happy anniversary." The minutes ticked by slowly. I listened to the house settling around me, the familiar creaks and groans of the structure we had made our home. I thought about our wedding day, how Mark had cried when he saw me walking down the aisle, how his voice had cracked when he said his vows. "You are my everything, Chloe, my reason for breathing. I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how loved you are." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. At 6:53, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart leapt. He was early. I pressed myself further into the shadows of the closet, my smile stretching so wide it almost hurt. This was going to be perfect. He was going to walk in, see the rose petals, the cake, and then I would jump out and throw my arms around him, and we would laugh and kiss and make love, and everything would be... The footsteps on the stairs were wrong. I didn't register it at first. My brain, so eager for the romantic reunion I had, choreographed, tried to explain it away. Maybe Mark had bought new shoes. Maybe he was walking differently because he was carrying something. Maybe the bedroom door opened. Click, click, click. High heels. My smile froze on my face. Through the crack in the closet door, I saw a woman's silhouette in the doorway. She was tall, slender, wearing a form-fitting black dress that I recognized immediately. I had helped her pick it out at Nordstrom 3 months ago. Jessica. Jessica, who had been my best friend since college. Jessica, who had introduced me to Mark at a mutual friend's party 6 years ago. Jessica, who had been my maid of honor at my wedding. Jessica, who worked as Mark's personal assistant at his investment firm because I had suggested he hire her when she lost her job 2 years ago. Jessica, who was now walking into my bedroom, alone, on my anniversary, wearing heels and a dress that screamed anything but just dropping by. I pressed my hand over my mouth, not understanding. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe she was here to help with a surprise for me. Maybe Mark had asked her to set something up. Maybe this was all part of some elaborate plan they had cooked up together to make this anniversary special. But Jessica didn't look around at the rose petals scattered across the bed. She didn't smile at the cake or the champagne. She barely glanced at any of it, Instead, she walked directly to the bed, my bed, the bed where I slept beside my husband every night, and sat down on the edge, crossing her long legs. She looked comfortable, too comfortable, like she had sat on that bed before. My stomach turned. Jessica pulled out her phone and dialed. I watched through the crack, my heart now pounding for entirely different reasons. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice I knew better than my own answered. "Hey, baby, you there already?" Mark's voice, warm and intimate, filled the room through the speakerphone. Baby. He called her baby. I stopped breathing. "Just got here," Jessica said, her voice low and sultry in a way I had never heard her speak before. The little wife set up quite a romantic scene, rose petals and everything. "It's almost sad." Mark laughed. The sound was like a knife sliding between my ribs. "Of course she did. Chloe's nothing if not predictable." "Too predictable," Jessica agreed. 5 years, and she still hasn't figured out that you're bored out of your mind. 5 years too long, Mark said, but not for much longer. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I stood frozen in that closet, watching my entire life unravel through a 2-inch crack in a door, listening to my husband and my best friend discuss me like I was an inconvenience, a pest to be dealt with. Jessica stood up and walked to the window, giving me a view of her back. "So, is everything ready? The anniversary toast?" "All set," Mark said. "I've got the champagne in. The car. The special champagne." Something about the way he said special made my blood run cold. "And you're sure about the dosage?" Jessica's voice dropped lower. "I don't want any mistakes. If she just gets sick..." "She won't get sick," Mark interrupted. "I've done my research. The dose in the champagne is lethal. Within an hour, it'll look like a heart attack. Young woman, stressful job, drinks a little too much on her anniversary. Tragic, but not suspicious." The room tilted. I grabbed onto a shelf of folded sweaters to keep myself from falling. Lethal. Dose. Heart attack. "I want to be a widower before midnight," Mark continued, his voice casual, like he was discussing weekend plans. "The insurance payout will clear in 30 days. We'll be on that beach in the Maldives before her family even finishes planning the funeral." Jessica laughed. A sound I had heard 1,000 times at brunches and birthday parties and girls' nights. A sound I had associated with friendship and warmth and trust. Now it sounded like breaking glass. "I've been waiting 2 years for this," she said. 2 years of pretending to be her friend, listening to her boring stories about her boring life with her boring husband. "Not boring for much longer," Mark said. "Once she's gone, it's just us, the way it should have been from the start." "You should have just married me instead," Jessica purred. "Chloe had the family connections, the money to invest in my firm. I needed her to get started." He paused. "But I don't need her anymore, and I definitely don't want her anymore. Not when I have you." I was going to be sick. I pressed harder against my mouth, terrified that any sound would give me away. My legs were shaking so badly, I was surprised they could still hold me up. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. This was a nightmare. One of those vivid, horrible dreams that feel so authentic you wake up crying. Any moment now, I would jolt awake in my bed, and Mark would be beside me, concerned, stroking my hair, asking what was wrong, but I didn't wake up. "I'm about 5 minutes out," Mark said. "Get ready to play your part. Concerned friend who stopped by to drop off an anniversary gift. You'll have 1 drink with us, then leave. By the time you're gone, Chloe will be getting sleepy. And by midnight, I'll be consoling the grieving widower." Jessica finished. "Don't forget to cry at the funeral. Oh, I'll give an Oscar-worthy performance. My best friend. Taken too soon. Such a tragedy." She made a mock sobbing sound, then laughed again. Mark laughed with her. I stood in that closet, surrounded by my clothes, my shoes, my life, and listened to my husband plan my murder. How long had I stood there? I don't know. Time had stopped having meaning. There was only the sound of their voices, the casual cruelty of their words, the absolute destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life. I had slept beside this man for 5, Years. I had made love to him, cooked for him, supported him, believed in him. I had defended him to my mother when she said he seemed too charming. I had dismissed my sister's concerns that he was too good to be true. I had trusted him with my life, and he was going to take it. I should go freshen up, Jessica said. I want to look appropriately casual when she gets home. She's usually back around 7:30, right? Like clockwork, Mark confirmed. My predictable little wife. Bile rose in my throat. Jessica walked toward the bathroom. I heard the door close, heard the water start running, and still I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by shock, by fear, by the sheer impossibility of what was happening. My husband was coming home in minutes with champagne that would kill me. My best friend was freshening up in my bathroom before watching me die. And I was hiding in a closet, frozen, useless, already a victim. No. The word rose up from somewhere deep inside me, somewhere I didn't know existed, a place that refused to die, a place that refused to be a victim. No, not like this. Not tonight. Not ever. The sound of the running water filled the silence. Jessica was in the bathroom. She couldn't hear me. She couldn't see me. And Mark was still 5 minutes away. I had maybe 3 minutes to act. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely control them, but I forced myself to move. Slowly, carefully, I pushed open the closet door. The hinges didn't creak. Another of Mark's improvements to our palace. Silent hinges, soft closed doors, everything designed for quiet luxury. Now, that quiet might save my life. I crept toward the bedroom door, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Behind me, the water continued to run. Jessica was humming something. I recognized it as the song that had played at my wedding. Our first dance song. The song Mark had chosen because he said it reminded him of how much he loved me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burst into that bathroom and confront her. Demand to know how she could do this. How she could pretend to be my friend while planning my death. But I didn't. Because I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I wasn't going to confront them in a moment of emotional chaos, where they could talk their way out of it, where Mark could use his silver tongue to convince me I had misunderstood, where Jessica could cry and claim she had been forced into it. I was going to survive. And then I was going to make them pay. I slipped out of the bedroom and down the stairs, moving faster now. Through the living room, past the kitchen, toward the back door. My hands fumbled with the lock. Come on, come on. And then I was outside, the cool evening air hitting my face like a slap of reality. I ran. Not far, just to the end of the driveway, then around the block. My bare feet slapping against the sidewalk, my red dress billowing behind me. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anything except the desperate need to not be in that house when Mark arrived with his lethal champagne. I stopped at the corner, gasping for breath, my mind racing. What now? What do I do now? I could call the police, but what would I tell them? That I heard my husband on the phone planning to poison me? I had no proof, no evidence, just my word against theirs. And Mark was charming. So charming. The police would show up, and he would smile that smile, and he would explain that his wife was having some kind of breakdown. Stress from work, you know how it is. Officers, no, I couldn't call the police, not yet, not without proof. I could run, get in my car and drive away, disappear, start a new life somewhere far from here. But that would mean giving up everything, my home, my family, my identity. And more than that, it would mean letting them win. Letting them think they had scared me off. Letting them try again someday, with someone else. No, I wasn't going to run. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart to slow. The initial shock was fading, replaced by something harder, something colder, something that felt like steel forming in my spine. I was going to go back. I was going to walk through that front door like nothing had happened. I was going to smile at my husband and hug my best friend and play the role of the perfect, predictable wife. And I was going to find a way to survive this night without drinking a drop of that champagne. And then I was going to destroy them both. I walked around the block, forcing myself to slow down, to breathe normally, to compose my face into an expression of pleasant tiredness. Just a woman coming home from work. Just a wife looking forward to celebrating her anniversary with her loving husband. Nothing unusual. Nothing wrong. By the time I reached my front door, I had almost convinced myself. I fished my keys out of my pocket. Thank God I had shoved them there by habit when I left for the surprise, and unlocked the door with trembling hands. The sound of the key in the lock seemed impossibly loud. "Hello?" I called out, my voice steady. Miracle. "Mark, I'm home." Footsteps upstairs. Then Jessica's voice, bright and surprised. "Chloe, oh my God, you're home early." I heard her coming down the stairs as I closed the front door behind me. When she appeared, she was smiling. That warm, friendly smile I had trusted for over a decade. She looked exactly like my best friend. She sounded exactly like my best friend. She was a monster wearing my best friend's face. "Jess!" I forced surprise into my voice. "What are you doing here?" She reached the bottom of the stairs and pulled me into a hug. I made myself return it, wrapping my arms around the woman who was planning to watch me die. "I wanted to drop off an anniversary gift," she said, pulling back to look at me. "Mark texted and said you usually get home around 7:30, so I thought I had time to set up a little surprise in your room. But you're early." Lies. All lies. So smooth, so natural, so perfectly delivered. "Work let out early," I said, matching her smile. "Slow day. I thought I'd come home and get ready for our anniversary dinner." "That's so sweet," Jessica gushed. "Mark is going to be so happy. He's been talking about this anniversary for weeks, planning something special." "Oh, I know exactly what he's been planning." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the front windows. A car pulling into the driveway. Mark's car. My husband was home, with the champagne that was meant to kill me. I felt Jessica's hand on my arm, her grip just a little too tight. "There he is," she said brightly. "The man of the hour." The front door opened, and Mark walked in. A bouquet of roses in one hand and a bottle of champagne in the other. He saw me and his face lit up with that smile. That beautiful, terrible, lying smile that I had fallen in love with 6 years ago. "Chloe." He set down the flowers and champagne and crossed the room to wrap me in his arms. "Happy anniversary, baby." He kissed me. His lips were warm and familiar against mine. I kissed him back. And I thought, you're going to regret this moment for the rest of your life. "Happy anniversary," I said, pulling back to look at him. "I can't believe it's been 5 years. 5 years of the best thing that ever happened to me," he said, tugging a strand of hair behind my ear with a tenderness that made me want to vomit. Jessica made an exaggerated awe sound behind us. "You two are so cute. I should take a picture." "You should stay for a drink," Mark said, glancing at her over my shoulder. "Just one, to toast the happy couple. Then we'll kick you out so I can have my wife all to myself." Jessica laughed. "I suppose I can manage one drink. I did bring you guys a gift after all." Mark's hand found the small of my back, guiding me toward the living room. His touch felt different now. What I had always interpreted as protective now felt possessive, controlling, steering me toward my death. I let him lead me. "I bought a special champagne," he said, reaching for the bottle he had set down. "Vintage. I've been saving it for a special occasion." I looked at the bottle in his hand. It looked like any other champagne. Elegant, expensive, the kind of gesture that would make any wife swoon. But I knew what was inside. I knew what that first sip would start. "That sounds perfect," I said. "But I should freshen up first. It was a long day at work, and I want to look nice for our anniversary dinner." Mark's grip on my back tightened almost imperceptibly. "You look beautiful already." "Just give me 5 minutes," I said, slipping away from his touch. "Jessica, want to come help me pick a necklace? I can't decide between the pearls or the diamond pendant Mark gave me for our 3rd anniversary." Jessica hesitated for just a fraction of a second. I saw something flicker in her eyes. Suspicion? Annoyance? Before her smile returned. "Of course, I love accessorizing." As we walked up the stairs together, I could feel Mark's eyes on my back, watching, waiting. He had no idea what was coming, and neither did Jessica. In the bedroom, I made a show of opening my jewelry box and sorting through necklaces while Jessica perched on the edge of the bed. My bed. The bed where she had sat so comfortably just 20 minutes ago while planning my murder. "So," I said, keeping my voice light, "how's work been? Mark keeps you pretty busy at the office." "Oh, you know," she examined her nails with studied casualness. "The usual, numbers and meetings and boring corporate stuff." "Right." I held up 2 necklaces. "Pearls or diamonds?" "Diamonds," she said, without hesitation. "Definitely diamonds. They're more special." I clasped the diamond pendant around my neck, watching her reflection in the mirror. She looked bored, impatient, eager probably to get this over with. Eager to watch me drink that champagne and wait for me to start feeling sick. Eager to slip away so Mark could discover my body. "You're such a good friend," I said softly. "Always there for me." Something shifted in her expression. Guilt? No. I don't think Jessica was capable of guilt, more like discomfort at the reminder of the role she was supposed to be playing. "That's what friends are for," she said. Yes, I thought. That's exactly what friends are for. We went back downstairs. Mark had set out 3 champagne flutes on the coffee table and was working on opening the bottle. The pop of the cork made me flinch. "There we go," he said, pouring the golden liquid into each glass. "Champagne for the most beautiful wife in the world, and for the best friend who made sure she gave me a chance." He handed me a glass. I took it, holding it carefully, watching the bubbles rise to the surface. Was the poison visible? Could I see it if I looked closely enough? Or was it dissolved completely, invisible, waiting? "To 5 years," Mark said, raising his glass. "And to many, many more." He looked at me expectantly. Jessica raised her glass too, her eyes fixed on me with an intensity that she was trying to disguise as celebratory excitement. They were waiting for me to drink. "To 5 years," I echoed, raising my glass. And then I did the only thing I could think of. I pretended to stumble. The champagne flew from my hand as I lurched forward, catching myself on the edge of the coffee table. The glass shattered on the floor, the poison liquid splashing across the expensive rug Mark had insisted we buy last year. "Oh no," I gasped. "Oh God, I'm so clumsy. I'm so sorry." I watched the champagne soak into the carpet, and I noticed something. The liquid was foaming slightly where it hit the fabric, bubbling in a way that champagne shouldn't bubble. A faint chemical reaction, visible only if you knew to look for it. The poison was real. It was all real. "It's fine," Mark said quickly, but his voice was tight, controlled. "It's just a rug. Are you okay?" I'm fine. I stood up, brushing off my dress. I can't believe I did that. All that special champagne, wasted. "There's plenty more in the bottle," he said, but I was already turning to Jessica. "Oh, Jess, you haven't touched yours. Here, let me make a toast properly. To the best friend a girl could ask for." I pushed her glass toward her lips. "Drink up." Jessica's eyes widened. Mark's hand shot out. "Wait." He grabbed Jessica's glass, knocking it from her hands. It fell to the floor and shattered, joining my glass in a puddle of poisoned champagne. The silence that followed was deafening. "Why the nervousness, honey?" I asked, my voice soft. Dangerous. I looked at my husband. Really looked at him. Maybe for the first time, and I saw panic in his eyes. He knew. In that moment, he knew that I knew. But he didn't know how much. And I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. He scrambled for an excuse. I thought I saw something in her glass. A piece of cork. I didn't want her to choke. "How thoughtful," I said, not breaking eye contact. "You're always looking out for everyone, aren't you, Mark?" Jessica was frozen on the couch, her face pale. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what to do about it. Good. Let them squirm. "Well," I said brightly, clapping my hands together, "I think the champagne is cursed tonight. Why don't we skip right to dinner? I made reservations at that Italian place you love, Mark. Jessica, you should probably head home. I'm sure your husband is wondering where you are." Jessica wasn't married. She didn't even have a boyfriend. I knew that perfectly well. But I wanted to remind her who had the power in this room. She stood up quickly, grabbing her purse. "Yes, you're right. I should go. Happy anniversary, you too?" She practically ran for the door. Mark watched her go, his jaw tight. When the door closed behind her, he turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he said, "alone at last." I smiled back. "Yes," I said, "alone at last." But I wasn't afraid, because I had already started planning his destruction, and he had no idea what was coming. The Italian restaurant was suffocating. Mark sat across from me, his charming smile firmly in place, playing the devoted husband with the ease of a man who had been rehearsing the role for 5 years. He ordered for both of us. "The lady will have the salmon, and I'll take the filet mignon," without asking what I wanted. I used to think it was romantic. Now, I recognized it for what it was: control. "You seem distracted tonight," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Everything okay?" I looked at his fingers intertwined with mine. Strong hands. Hands that had held me through nightmares, through losses, through every challenge of our marriage. Hands that had poured poison into a champagne glass meant for me. "Just tired," I said. "Long week at work?" "You work too hard." He stroked his thumb across my knuckles. "I keep telling you, you don't need to work. I make enough for both of us." "You make enough because I invested my inheritance in your company," I thought, "because my family connections opened doors you never could have opened on your own." But I smiled and said, "I like my job. It gives me purpose. I should be your purpose." He said it lightly, teasingly, but there was an edge underneath. 5 years of marriage, and you're still more devoted to that marketing firm than to me. I extracted my hand from his grip under the pretense of reaching for my water glass. "That's not true. You know you're the most important thing in my life." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Through the rest of dinner, I performed. I laughed at his jokes. I nodded along to his stories about work. I let him refill my wine glass, regular wine from the restaurant's collection, nothing he could have tampered with, and pretended to drink while mostly pushing the liquid around. My mind was elsewhere, running calculations, planning moves. The audio recording on my phone. That was my ace. When I had hidden in the closet, I had already been holding my phone, ready to film Mark's surprised face when I jumped out. And instead, I had hit record when Jessica made her call and captured the entire conversation. I want to be a widower before midnight. The dose in the champagne has to be lethal. I had them. I had proof. But was it enough? Mark was smart. He had lawyers. He had connections. He would claim the recording was doctored or taken out of context, or that I was having some kind of mental breakdown. He would use his charm and his resources to make me look crazy. I needed more. "I was thinking," Mark said, pulling me back to the present. "We should take a vacation. Just the two of us. Somewhere tropical. The Maldives." The one-way tickets I had heard them mention. "That sounds wonderful," I said carefully. "When were you thinking?" "Soon? Maybe next month?" He smiled, and I saw it now, the calculation behind his eyes. He was already adjusting his plan. The champagne had failed. He needed a new approach. "I've always wanted to take you somewhere exotic. A second honeymoon? A second honeymoon where I would have an unfortunate accident. A drowning, perhaps. Or a fall from a cliff. Something that would look tragic but natural. Let me check my work schedule," I said. "I might have some conflicts." His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. No rush." By the time we got home, it was nearly 10 o'clock. The champagne stains on the living room rug had dried to a dark, ugly blotch. Mark frowned at it as we walked in. "We should replace that," he said. "I'll call the cleaning service tomorrow." Or maybe, I thought, you want to get rid of the evidence before anyone notices the chemical reaction in the carpet fibers. "I'm exhausted," I said, faking a yawn. "I think I'm going to head up to bed." Mark's expression flickered. Disappointment? Frustration? "It's our anniversary. I thought we'd—" I know. I touched his face, making myself hold his gaze. "I'm just so tired." "Rain check for tomorrow?" He looked at me for a long moment. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out if I suspected anything. I kept my expression innocent, exhausted, nothing more than a wife who had had a long day. Finally, he nodded. "Tomorrow, then." He kissed my forehead. Happy anniversary, Chloe. Happy anniversary. I went upstairs alone, my heart pounding with every step. The bedroom still had the rose petals on the bed, wilted now, sad, and the small cake on the nightstand. The champagne I had brought was still in the closet, warm and forgotten. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, finally letting my mask fall. My hands were shaking, my whole body was shaking. But I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to cry. Crying was for later, when I was safe, when this was over. Right now, I needed to think. I pulled out my phone and checked the recording. It was there, clear and damning. Mark's voice, "I want to be a widower before midnight." Jessica's voice, "And you're sure about the dosage?" I saved the file to my cloud storage, and then I emailed it to myself. Then I saved it to a separate password-protected folder. Multiple backups, multiple locations. Even if Mark somehow found my phone and deleted the original, the evidence would survive. But I still needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of what he was planning. I needed to know about the insurance policy he had mentioned. Had he really taken out a policy on my life? How much? When? And I needed to know about the Maldives tickets. Were they real? Were they just for him and Jessica? Or was there a ticket with my name on it too? A ticket he planned to use as an alibi before I disappeared on vacation. I heard Mark moving around downstairs. The clink of a glass. The creak of his office door opening and closing. His office. That's where he kept everything important. His files, his documents, his secrets. I had never snooped before. In 5 years of marriage, it had never occurred to me to question what Mark did behind closed doors. I trusted him. I loved him. I believed that our marriage was built on honesty and mutual respect. What a fool I had been. I changed into my pajamas and climbed into bed, surrounded by wilted rose petals. I left the lights on and the door unlocked so Mark would think I was waiting for him. But I had no intention of sleeping. 20 minutes later, I heard him come up the stairs. The bedroom door opened. "Still awake?" he asked. I mumbled, pretending to be half asleep. "Just drifting off." He changed in the bathroom. He always changed in the bathroom, never in front of me, even after 5 years, and slipped into bed beside me. I felt his weight on the mattress, felt him shift toward me. "Good night, beautiful," he whispered. "Night," I breathed, keeping my eyes closed, keeping my breathing slow and steady. He didn't touch me. He didn't try to wake me. He just lay there, a few inches away, a stranger in my bed. I waited. The minutes stretched into eternity. I listened to his breathing, waiting for it to slow and deepen into sleep. Every fiber of my being wanted to leap out of that bed, to run away, to never be in the same room with this monster again. But I stayed. I waited. I played the part. Finally, his breathing changed. The soft, rhythmic pattern of sleep. I opened my eyes. The clock on the nightstand read 11:47 p.m. He had been asleep for almost half an hour. I watched his face in the dim light. This man I had married, this man I had loved. He looked peaceful, innocent. Evil, I was learning, often wore a beautiful face. I slipped out of bed, moving silently. Mark didn't stir. I grabbed my robe from the back of the door and crept out of the bedroom, closing the door behind me with infinite care. The house was dark and quiet. I made my way down the stairs, avoiding the creaky step third from the bottom, and padded toward Mark's office. The door was closed, but not locked. Mark had never bothered to lock it. Why would he? His loving wife would never dream of invading his privacy. I turned the handle and stepped inside. The office smelled like him. His cologne, his leather chair, the faint musk of expensive ambition. I had always loved this smell. Now it made my stomach turn. I didn't dare turn on the light. Instead, I used my phone's flashlight, keeping the beam low and directed so it wouldn't be visible from outside. Where to start? His desk was immaculate, everything in its place. A laptop. Password protected, I knew. A leather desk pad, a cup of expensive pens. In the drawers, I found the usual clutter. Receipts, business cards, a spare phone charger. But no incriminating documents. Nothing about insurance policies or plane tickets or plans to murder his wife. Think, Chloe. Where would he hide something important? The filing cabinet. It stood in the corner, a tall metal monolith that I had never paid attention to before. I tried the top drawer. Locked. I looked around for a key. In the desk, under the desk pad, inside the pen cup, nothing. I was about to give up when I remembered something. Mark kept a spare key to the house in a fake rock by the front door. He had shown it to me when we moved in, proud of his cleverness. "You never know when you'll lock yourself out," he had said. If he had a fake rock for the house key, did he have something similar in his office? I scanned the room with my flashlight. Books on the shelf. A small sculpture of a golfer. A gift from his father. A decorative box that looked like it came from Pottery Barn. The box. I picked it up and shook it gently. Something rattled inside. I opened it and found a single, small key. The filing cabinet opened with a soft click. Inside, I found folders arranged by category. Taxes, investments, property, insurance. I pulled out the folder and flipped through the documents, my hands trembling. And there it was. A life insurance policy. $5 million. Taken out 3 years ago, shortly after we bought this house. The policy was on my life, with Mark as the sole beneficiary. $5 million. That's what my life was worth to him. That's what I would become after the champagne took effect, and my heart stopped, and he played the grieving widower. $5 million to split with Jessica. Then a lifetime on a tropical beach, free from the wife he had never really loved. I took photos of every page, but I wasn't done. I kept searching. In a folder labeled Travel, I found the plane tickets. 2 one-way tickets to the Maldives, departing tomorrow at 6 p.m. in the names of Mark Thompson and Jessica Reed. Tomorrow. They had planned to leave tomorrow. After my funeral? No. Before my body was even cold. They were going to flee the country, leave my family to deal with the aftermath, start their new life together before anyone could ask too many questions. The arrogance of it. The cold, calculated arrogance. I photographed the tickets too. There was more. Bank statements showing transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Presumably Jessica's. Emails printed out. Why would he print them? Evidence of his own stupidity, I supposed. Between him and Jessica, discussing the plan in veiled terms. A receipt for something called GHB variant from an overseas pharmacy. The poison, I realized. He had ordered the poison online. Every document was another nail in his coffin. Every photograph was another piece of evidence that would destroy him. I was so engrossed in my discoveries that I almost didn't hear the footsteps on the stairs. Almost. But some survival instinct kicked in. Some primitive part of my brain that recognized danger before my conscious mind caught up. I shoved the folders back into the cabinet, pocketed the key, and looked around desperately for somewhere to hide. The closet. There was a small closet in the corner where Mark kept old files and office supplies. I slipped inside, pulling the door closed just as the office door opened. Light flooded the room. "Who's there?" Mark's voice, hard and suspicious. I pressed myself against the wall of the closet, surrounded by boxes of printer paper and old tax returns. Through the slats in the door, I could see Mark's silhouette moving through the room. "Chloe?" He walked to his desk and looked around. He checked behind the door. He looked out the window, then he walked toward the closet. I stopped breathing. His hand reached for the door handle, and then his phone rang. The sound was jarring in the silence, and Mark swore under his breath. He pulled the phone from his robe pocket and looked at the screen. "Jessica, what the hell are you calling for at midnight?" He walked away from the closet, back toward his desk, his attention on the phone. "What do you mean she knows?" "No, that's impossible. She was at work all day." "The champagne? No, she just tripped. She's clumsy, you know that." "Yes, I'm sure. Stop panicking." He was pacing now, his back to the closet. "Look, we just need to stay calm. The plan is still good. We just need a new approach. I don't know, okay? Give me time to think." "No, we're not postponing the trip. The tickets are for tomorrow, and we're going to be on that plane. I'll handle Chloe. I always handle Chloe. He ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring at his phone. Then he walked out of the office, turning off the light behind him. I stayed in that closet for a long time after he left, waiting, listening, making sure he wasn't coming back. Finally, when I was certain the house was quiet, I slipped out. I didn't go back to the bedroom. I couldn't bear to lie beside him again, not after everything I had learned. Instead, I crept to the guest room at the end of the hall and locked the door behind me. I sat on the guest bed in the darkness, my phone in my hands, and I made a list of everything I had. The audio recording of Mark and Jessica planning my murder, photos of the insurance policy, photos of the plane tickets, photos of the bank transfers and emails and poison receipt. It was enough. It was more than enough. But I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because there was one more thing I needed. I needed to look Mark in the eye when it all fell apart. I needed him to know that the predictable little wife he had underestimated had been his undoing. Tomorrow was our anniversary dinner, the makeup dinner he had promised when I was too tired tonight. Tomorrow, he would try again. Maybe not with champagne this time, but something. He would try to finish what he had started, and I would be ready. I sent the photos and recording to 3 people: my sister, my lawyer, and my father. I wrote a brief email explaining what I had discovered and what I feared Mark would do. I asked them not to contact me or the police until I gave the signal. I wanted to handle this my way. Then I lay down on the guest bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn. I didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. There would be time for tears later. Right now, I had a husband to destroy. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Mark's voice. "Chloe? Chloe, where are you?" He sounded panicked. Good. I took a moment to compose myself, then unlocked the guest room door. "I'm here," I called out. I couldn't sleep, so I came to the guest room. I didn't want to disturb you. Mark appeared in the hallway, his face a mask of concern. "I woke up and you were gone. I was worried." "I'm fine." I walked past him toward the bathroom. "Just had insomnia. I'm going to take a shower before work." "Work?" He followed me. "I thought we could spend the day together. You know, since we missed our anniversary celebration last night." I paused at the bathroom door. "I have an important meeting this morning, but I'll be home early, I promise. We can have that makeup dinner tonight." He hesitated. I could see him calculating, adjusting his plans. "What time will you be home?" 6 at the latest? I'll make reservations somewhere nice." "That sounds perfect." I gave him a smile that felt like broken glass on my lips. "I'm looking forward to it." In the shower, I let the water run over me and finally allowed myself a moment of weakness. Not crying, I still couldn't cry, but shaking. Trembling with the enormity of what I was facing. My husband was trying to kill me. My best friend was helping him. And tonight, at dinner, I was going to end them both. I dried off, did my makeup with careful precision, and dressed in my sharpest power suit, the navy blue one that made me feel invincible. When I came downstairs, Mark was in the kitchen making breakfast. "Eggs?" he offered. "Just coffee." I poured myself a cup, watching him over the rim. "Big meeting today. Need to stay sharp." "You're always sharp." He set a plate of eggs at the table. "I made them anyway." "You should eat something." I looked at the eggs. They looked perfectly normal. Fluffy, yellow, seasoned with pepper just the way I liked them. But I remembered the champagne. "I really can't," I said. "Running late. I'll grab something at the office." I left before he could argue. In my car, I allowed myself one long, shuddering breath. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call. "Dad, I need to talk to you. Can you meet me at that coffee shop near your house in an hour?" My father's voice was concerned but steady. He had always been my rock. "Of course, sweetheart. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, "but it will be." I spent the morning with my father and my lawyer, walking them through everything I had discovered. My father wanted to call the police immediately. My lawyer advised a more strategic approach. "If we go to the police now with just the evidence you've gathered, there's a chance Mark could wriggle out of it," she said. "He has resources, good attorneys. We need to catch him in the act. or as close to it as possible. What are you suggesting? You said Jessica is already nervous. Mark is adjusting his plan. If you can get them to discuss their next move while being recorded, while witnesses are present, the case becomes airtight. So I should, confront them at dinner? Not confront, provoke, make them reveal themselves, and when they do, the police will be ready. It was risky, but it was also the best chance of making sure Mark and Jessica never hurt anyone again. We spent the rest of the morning planning. My lawyer contacted a friend in the police department who owed her a favor, someone who would take my evidence seriously and be ready to respond. My father made backup copies of all the files I had sent him. By mid-afternoon, everything was in place. At 5:30 p.m., I texted Mark, "Leaving work now. See you at home." He responded immediately, "Can't wait. I love you." I stared at those 3 words for a long time. I love you. How many times had he said that to me? How many times had I believed it? I put my phone away and drove home. Mark was waiting in the living room when I walked in. He was dressed in a suit I had bought him for Christmas last year, looking every inch the devoted husband. There was a new bottle of wine on the coffee table, not champagne this time, and 2 glasses. "You look beautiful," he said, standing to greet me. "Thank you." I stayed near the door. "I should change for dinner." "Of course." He smiled that smile. "Take your time. I'll be right here." I went upstairs and changed into a red dress. The same red dress I had worn when I hid in the closet yesterday. It felt like armor now. Before I went back down, I made one last phone call. "We're ready," I said. "We're in position," the voice on the other end replied. "Just give the signal." I hung up and looked at myself in the mirror. Tonight, it ends. I took a breath and went downstairs. Mark had poured 2 glasses of wine and was standing by the window looking out at the backyard. He turned when he heard me approach. "Perfect," he said softly. "You're perfect. You always say that, because it's always true." He handed me a glass of wine. "To us." I took the glass but didn't drink. "Actually," I said, "before we toast, I think we should talk." Something flickered in his eyes. "Talk? About what?" "About us. About our marriage. About where we go from here." He set down his own glass, his smile fading slightly. "Is something wrong?" "I don't know." I walked to the couch and sat down, still holding the wine. "I just feel like there's something between us. Something you're not telling me. Chloe." He sat down across from me, reaching for my hand. "Whatever it is, we can work through it. We love each other." I pulled my hand away. "Do we?" I looked at him steadily. "Do we really love each other, Mark? Or have we just been playing roles for the past 5 years?" His expression shifted. Confusion. Concern. And underneath it all, a growing wariness. "I don't understand what you're asking." "I'm asking." I set down the wine glass. "I'm asking if you would tell me the truth. If I asked you something directly, would you be honest with me?" "Of course." "Really? No matter what?" "Chloe, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "I hid in the closet yesterday," I said, "to surprise you for our anniversary." The color drained from his face. "But you didn't come home first. Jessica did, and she made a phone call." He was frozen. Absolutely frozen. "A phone call to you, Mark, on speakerphone." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "So here's my question," I said softly. "The one you promised to answer honestly. Are you planning to kill me?" For one long, terrible moment, neither of us moved. Then Mark lunged for me. I was ready. I threw the wine in his face. Poetic justice, I thought, and dove off the couch as he crashed into the cushions where I had been sitting. I ran for the front door, my heels clicking against the hardwood. "Chloe!" he roared behind me. I yanked open the front door and found myself face to face with 2 police officers. "Chloe Thompson?" one of them asked. "Yes." I stepped aside, pointing back into the house. "That's my husband, Mark Thompson. He tried to poison me last night and just attacked me now." Mark appeared in the doorway behind me, his face twisted with rage. When he saw the police, he stopped cold. "Officers," he said, his voice transforming instantly into smooth confusion. I don't know what my wife has told you, but she's clearly having some kind of breakdown. She's been acting strangely all day. Sir, we're going to need you to step outside, the officer said. This is my house. Sir, step outside, now. 2 more squad cars pulled up to the curb. I watched as my husband, the man who had promised to love me until death do us part, the man who had tried to make that death come early, was handcuffed in his own driveway. This is a mistake, he shouted. She's crazy. She's been planning this. Mr. Thompson, you have the right to remain silent. I stood on the porch and watched them read him his rights. And for the first time, since I had heard his voice through that closet door, I felt something that might have been peace. It was over. I was alive, and Mark was going to pay. But it wasn't over. Not really. Not yet. The next few hours were a blur of statements and questions and paperwork. I sat in an interview room at the police station, a styrofoam cup of cold coffee in front of me, telling my story to Detective Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who took notes with methodical precision. I told her everything: the closet, the phone call, the champagne, the documents I had found in Mark's office, the insurance policy, the plane tickets, the emails, the poison receipt. She didn't interrupt. She just listened and wrote and nodded. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied me with something that might have been respect. You kept remarkably calm through all of this, she said. I didn't have a choice. I wrapped my hands around the cold coffee cup. If I had panicked, if I had confronted them right away, I would probably be dead. Fair point. She glanced at her notes. We've arrested Jessica Reed as well. She was picked up at the airport about an hour ago, trying to board a flight to Miami. Apparently, she decided to change destinations when the Maldives plan fell through. I felt a cold satisfaction at that. Running. She had been running, like the coward she was. What happens now? I asked. Now we build the case. We've already sent officers to collect the champagne and the carpet from your home. If the chemical analysis confirms what you've told us, that's attempted murder. Combined with the evidence you gathered and the recording on your phone, your husband is looking at a very long time in prison. And Jessica? Conspiracy to commit murder. She's equally culpable. Detective Chen closed her notebook. You're a brave woman, Mrs. Thompson. A lot of people in your situation would have frozen, or run, or gotten themselves killed. I'm not brave, I said. I'm just angry. She nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. My father was waiting for me in the lobby when I finally emerged from the interview room. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the past 24 hours, his face gray with worry. Chloe. He pulled me into a tight embrace. Thank God. Thank God you're okay. I let myself sag against him, just for a moment, just long enough to remember what it felt like to be safe. I'm okay, Dad. I'm okay. He drove me to his house. I couldn't face going back to the home I had shared with Mark, not tonight, maybe not ever. And my mother fussed over me with tea and blankets and concerned looks. My sister Amanda arrived an hour later, her eyes red from crying. I can't believe it, she kept saying. I can't believe he would do this. Mark, of all people. He seemed so perfect? I finished for her. Yeah, that was the point. We sat in my parents' living room late into the night, processing, questioning, trying to make sense of the senseless. My mother wanted to know if there had been signs, warning flags she should have noticed. My father wanted to know how Mark had slipped through, how a man who had stood in his living room and asked for permission to marry his daughter could have been a monster in disguise. I didn't have answers for them. I didn't have answers for myself. All I knew was that the life I had built, the marriage, the home, the future I had imagined was gone. Burned to ash by a man who had never loved me, who had seen me only as a stepping stone to something he wanted more. Get some sleep, my mother finally said, around 2 a.m. Tomorrow will be a long day, but you're safe now. That's what matters. She was right. I was safe. But as I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the glow in the dark stars, I had stuck on the ceiling when I was 12. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Mark wouldn't go down without a fight. He was too arrogant, too entitled, too convinced of his own cleverness. He would hire the best lawyers. He would construct an elaborate defense. He would try to turn this around, to paint me as the villain and himself as the victim. I needed to be ready. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with notifications. News of Mark's arrest had leaked. Someone at the station, probably. Or maybe one of the neighbors, who had seen the police cars in our driveway. The headlines were sensational. Investment manager arrested for alleged murder. Plot against wife. Anniversary horror. Husband accused of attempting to poison spouse. Closet confession. How one woman overheard her own murder being planned. I scrolled through the articles with a mixture of numbness and horror. My photo was everywhere, pulled from my social media accounts, from our wedding photos, from company headshots. So was Mark's, always paired with adjectives like charming and successful and beloved by colleagues. The comments were worse. Some people expressed sympathy, but others questioned my story. Suggested I had made it up for attention or for money or because I was bitter about something in our marriage. They pointed to Mark's clean record, his community involvement, his charitable donations, and asked how a man like that could possibly be a murderer. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. Evil doesn't wear a sign. It wears a charming smile and a tailored suit and tells you it loves you while planning your death. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Chloe Thompson? A crisp, professional voice. Yes? This is Daniel Reeves. I'm Mark's attorney. I'm calling to discuss a potential resolution to this unfortunate situation. I sat up straighter, my heart pounding. A resolution? My client maintains his complete innocence in these allegations. He believes there's been a terrible misunderstanding, one that has spiraled out of control due to your emotional state. He's willing to what? I interrupted. Admit that he tried to kill me? Turn himself in and plead guilty? Mrs. Thompson, I understand you're upset, but I'm not upset, Mr. Reeves. I'm angry. Your client plotted my murder with his mistress, poisoned champagne that I was supposed to drink, and was about to flee the country with the woman he planned to share my life insurance payout with. I have recordings. I have documents. I have physical evidence of the poison he put in that champagne. So please, tell me what kind of resolution your client is proposing that doesn't involve him spending the next several decades in prison. There was a pause. I see, Daniel Reeves said, his voice cooling. In that case, I'll advise my client that settlement negotiations are not on the table. You do that. I hung up. But the call left me shaken. Mark was already fighting back, already trying to manipulate the situation. I needed to fight harder. I called my own lawyer, Patricia Chen, no relation to the detective, a fierce woman with a reputation for destroying opponents in court. I got a call from Mark's attorney, I told her. They want to resolve things. I expected that, Patricia said. They're testing the waters, seeing how you'll respond. How did you handle it? I told him where he could shove his resolution. She laughed, a sharp, approving sound. Good. That's exactly the right approach. Show them you won't be intimidated. Now, let's talk strategy. We spent the next hour on the phone, discussing the case, the evidence, the potential challenges. Mark's lawyers would try to discredit me, she warned. They would dig into my past, looking for anything they could use. They would question my mental health, my motivations, my credibility. Let them try, I said. I have nothing to hide. I know, but you need to be prepared for how ugly this is going to get. They'll try to make you the villain, Chloe. They'll say you manipulated him, trapped him, fabricated evidence. They'll twist every moment of your marriage into something sinister. Can they really do that? With all the evidence I have? Evidence can be challenged, recordings can be claimed to be doctored, documents can be alleged to be planted. Mark has money and good lawyers. They won't make this easy. I took a deep breath. What do I need to do? Stay strong, stay calm. Don't talk to the press. Don't engage with Mark or his attorneys directly. Everything goes through me. And most importantly, trust the process. The truth is on your side. We just need to make sure the jury sees it. Over the next few weeks, I tried to follow her advice. I moved out of my parents' house and into a small apartment on the other side of town. A fresh start, a space that held no memories of Mark. I went back to work, burying myself in projects and deadlines, trying to rebuild some sense of normalcy. But normal felt impossibly far away. I couldn't sleep without nightmares. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that closet, listening to Mark's voice discuss my death with the casualness of a dinner order. I would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. During the day, I jumped at shadows. I looked over my shoulder constantly, half expecting to see Mark or Jessica lurking behind me. Every unfamiliar face was a potential threat. Every phone call could be another manipulation attempt. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Elizabeth Warren, who specialized in trauma. She helped me understand that my reactions were normal, that my brain was trying to protect me from a danger it couldn't quite accept was over. You survived something terrifying, she told me in one of our sessions. Your mind is still in survival mode. It's going to take time to feel safe again. How much time? She gave me a gentle smile. As much as it takes. There's no timeline for healing, Chloe. Be patient with yourself. Patience was not my strong suit, but I tried. 3 weeks after Mark's arrest, I received a letter. It had no return address, just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. You think you've won. You haven't. This is far from over. Watch your back. I stared at the letter for a long moment, my hands trembling. Then, I called Detective Chen. Another threat, I told her. Anonymous letter. No return address. She sighed. I was afraid of this. Mark's been making calls from jail. We've monitored some of them, but he's clever about what he says. We suspect he's still coordinating with people on the outside. People like who? His assistant, for one. We arrested Jessica, but Mark had other employees, other contacts. People who might still be loyal to him. People who might want to help him. Discourage your testimony. My blood went cold. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying we're increasing patrols near your apartment and suggesting you consider additional security measures. I'm also saying you should vary your routine, avoid going to the same places, at the same times, stay alert. This was insane. I was the victim here. I was the one who had almost been murdered. And now I was being told to live in fear because my attempted murderer still had reach? Can't you revoke his phone privileges or something? We're working on it. But Mark's lawyers are good. They're fighting every restriction we try to impose. She paused. I'm sorry, Chloe. I know this isn't fair. We're doing everything we can to keep you safe. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and looked at the letter again. Watch your back. I had spent my whole marriage watching my front, trusting the man beside me. Look where that had gotten me. But I wasn't the same naive woman who had hidden in a closet with champagne and rose petals. That woman had died the moment she heard her husband plan her murder. What had been born in that closet was something stronger, something harder. I wasn't going to watch my back. I was going to fight. I called Patricia. I want to know everything about Mark's business dealings. Every investment, every partnership, every client, everything. Why? She asked. Because a man who would try to murder his wife for insurance money isn't above other crimes. Mark's been running that firm for 7 years. I want to know what skeletons are hiding in his books. There was a pause. That could take time and resources. I have both. My parents had offered to help with legal expenses, and I had my own savings, money Mark never knew about, squirreled away in an account he couldn't access. Do whatever it takes. You're thinking like a strategist now, Patricia said, and I could hear the approval in her voice. Good. We'll destroy him from every angle. Over the following weeks, I became obsessed with building the case against Mark. Patricia's team of forensic accountants dove into his financial records, and what they found was exactly what I had expected: fraud, years of it. Mark had been embezzling from his clients, skimming money from their investments, cooking the books to hide the shortfall. The total amount stolen was staggering, nearly $10 million over 7 years. He wasn't just a would-be murderer. He was a thief, a con artist, a fraud. "This is why he needed you dead," Patricia explained when she showed me the findings. He was running out of time. Some of his clients were starting to ask questions, and his house of cards was about to collapse. The insurance payout from your death would have been enough to cover the gap and disappear before anyone caught on. And Jessica? She was part of it. She helped him falsify the records, manage the accounts, keep the clients distracted. They've been partners in crime for years. The affair was just the icing on the cake. I looked at the pile of evidence on Patricia's desk. Documents, spreadsheets, emails, bank records. A complete picture of the man I had married. And the monster he truly was. "We're going to bury him," I said. "Yes," Patricia agreed. "We absolutely are." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after the arrest. I spent every day of those 6 weeks preparing, going over my testimony with Patricia, reviewing the evidence, steeling myself for seeing Mark again. And then, 3 days before the hearing, something unexpected happened. Jessica wanted to talk. Her lawyer reached out to Patricia with a proposal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Jessica would testify against Mark. She would confirm the murder plot, the fraud, everything. She would give them all the details they needed to ensure Mark never saw freedom again. "Do we need her?" I asked Patricia. "We have so much evidence already. We have plenty of evidence for the attempted murder. But for the fraud charges, Jessica's testimony could be crucial. She was his bookkeeper. She knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak." I thought about it. The idea of Jessica getting a reduced sentence made me sick. She had been my friend, or pretended to be, for over a decade. She had smiled at my wedding, hugged me at my birthday parties, listened to my secrets and dreams and fears. And the whole time, she had been plotting against me. But if her testimony ensured that Mark spent the rest of his life in prison, "Fine," I said. "Make the deal." 2 days later, I was sitting in an interview room at the jail, face to face with Jessica for the first time since the night of my attempted murder. She looked terrible. Jail hadn't been kind to her. The expensive highlights were growing out, her nails were chipped, and her face was pale and drawn. She looked nothing like the polished, confident woman who had sat on my bed and casually discussed my death. "Chloe." Her voice cracked. "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't respond. I just looked at her, waiting. "I know you must hate me. I would hate me too. What I did, what we planned, there's no excuse. I know that." Still nothing from me. Jessica twisted her hands together, her eyes filling with tears. "I loved him. I know that's not a justification, but it's the truth. I loved Mark, and I would have done anything for him. He made me believe that you were the problem, that you were keeping us apart, that if you were just gone, we could finally be together. So you helped him plan my murder." My voice was flat, empty. "Yes." The tears spilled down her cheeks. "God, Chloe, yes. And I know it's unforgivable. I know there's nothing I can say that will make up for it, but I need you to know, I never wanted to hurt you. Not really. Mark convinced me it was the only way." "The only way to what? Steal my husband? Take my money? Live happily ever after on a beach while my body was barely cold?" She flinched like I had slapped her. "When you put it like that, that's exactly what it was, Jessica. That's exactly what you were planning to do. There's no other way to put it." Silence stretched between us. "He manipulated me," she said, finally, quietly. "I see that now. He manipulated both of us. You were his Mark from the beginning, the rich girl, with connections who could fund his dreams. And I was his backup plan, his insurance policy, the one who would help him escape when it all fell apart. And you're only realizing this now that you're in jail. I'm realizing it because the moment things went wrong, he tried to blame everything on me. His lawyer called me to say that Mark's defense strategy involves painting me as the mastermind. He's going to throw me under the bus to save himself. She laughed bitterly. I gave up everything for him. My friendship with you, my integrity, my future. And this is how he repays me. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, for another layer of deceit. But all I saw was a broken woman who had realized too late that she had backed the wrong horse. Why should I believe you? I asked. Why should I trust anything you say? You shouldn't, she admitted. I haven't earned your trust. But I can give you the truth, Chloe. The whole truth. About Mark, about the fraud, about the other women. Other women? Something flickered in Jessica's eyes. Genuine pain, I thought. I wasn't the only one. There were others before me. Mark always had someone on the side, someone he could use when he needed them. I was just the latest in a long line. Of course there were others. Mark wasn't capable of genuine connection. He only knew how to use people. Tell me everything, I said, from the beginning. And she did. For the next 3 hours, Jessica poured out every detail of her relationship with Mark, every secret she knew about his business, every lie he had ever told. She named names, gave dates, provided documentation. By the time she was done, I had enough ammunition to destroy Mark 10 times over. Why? I asked when she finished. Why are you really doing this? Jessica was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at me with something that might have been honesty. Because I want to hurt him, she said. The way he hurt me, the way he was going to let me take the fall while he walked free. She laughed, a hollow sound. Is that petty enough for you? It was. But I understood it, because I wanted to hurt him too. Testify, I said, standing up. Tell the truth. Help them put him away forever. And then maybe, someday, I'll be able to think about forgiving you. I walked out without looking back. The preliminary hearing was everything Patricia had promised it would be, and more. Mark sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, his face arranged into an expression of innocent confusion. But when the judge read the charges, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, I saw something crack behind his eyes. He was scared. Good. Jessica testified first, laying out the murder plot in damning detail. Mark's lawyers tried to discredit her, to paint her as the true mastermind, but she had documentation, emails, text messages, financial records. Every attack they launched, she countered with evidence. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand with my head held high. I didn't look at Mark. I couldn't. If I looked at him, I might lose my composure, and I needed every ounce of control I had. I told my story, the closet, the phone call, the champagne, the investigation, the confrontation. I answered every question Patricia asked, calmly and clearly, painting a picture of a woman who had trusted her husband completely and nearly paid for that trust with her life. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Mark's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. Mrs. Thompson, he began, his voice smooth as oil, isn't it true that your marriage was troubled? That you and my client had been having difficulties for months before this alleged incident? No, I said. I believed we were happy. I was apparently the only one. And isn't it true that you had recently discovered evidence of financial irregularities in your husband's business? Evidence that, if revealed, would have destroyed his career? I discovered that evidence after I overheard him planning my murder. It confirmed what I already knew, that my husband was a criminal. Or perhaps, the lawyer suggested, you discovered the evidence first and decided to frame your husband for attempted murder to cover your own involvement in the fraud? I stared at him. Are you seriously suggesting that I poisoned my own champagne? I'm suggesting that your story has convenient holes, Mrs. Thompson. You claim to have been hiding in a closet when this alleged phone call took place. How do we know you didn't fabricate the recording? How do we know this isn't all an elaborate scheme to destroy an innocent man? Patricia was on her feet before I could respond. Objection. The defense is speculating wildly without a shred of evidence. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Reeves, do you have any actual questions for the witness, or are you just here to waste the court's time? The cross-examination continued, but Mark's lawyer had lost his footing. Every question he asked, I answered calmly and completely. Every trap he tried to set, I sidestepped. By the time I stepped down from the witness stand, I could see defeat in his eyes. The judge took less than an hour to rule. Based on the evidence presented, she announced, I find sufficient probable cause to bind Mark Thompson over for trial on all charges. Bail is denied. Mark's face went white. I watched them lead him away in handcuffs. This man I had married, this man I had loved, this man who had tried to kill me. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just a vast, empty exhaustion. But beneath the exhaustion, somewhere deep in my chest, there was a small spark of something else. Peace. The battle wasn't over, the trial was still to come. Months of legal proceedings and testimony and drama. But the war was already won. Mark was going to prison. Jessica was going to prison. And I was going to live. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with a glass of wine. Poured from a bottle I had opened myself, with my own hands, and raised a toast. To surviving, I said to the empty room. And for the first time since that night in the closet, I allowed myself to smile. The months between the preliminary hearing and the trial were a strange limbo. I existed in a suspended state, no longer the terrified woman who had fled her own home, but not yet the survivor I was trying to become. I went to work, I saw my therapist, I spent evenings with my family, slowly rebuilding the connections that Mark had subtly corroded over 5 years. I hadn't noticed it at the time, how Mark always had a reason we couldn't visit my parents, how he made subtle comments about my sister that created distance, how he monopolized my time until I had no friends left except the ones he approved of. Jessica, of course, had been at the top of that list. Now, without Mark's influence, I was rediscovering the relationships I had neglected. My sister and I started having weekly dinners. My mother called every day just to check in. My father sent me articles he thought I'd find interesting, political commentary, financial advice, anything to let me know he was thinking of me. It was healing, slowly, like physical therapy after an injury, painful, exhausting, but necessary. But there were still dark days. Days when I couldn't get out of bed. Days when the nightmares were so vivid, I could smell the champagne, feel the closet walls pressing in around me. Days when I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, a woman marked by betrayal, by fear, by the knowledge that the person who should have protected her had tried to destroy her. On one of those dark days, 3 months before the trial, I received an unexpected phone call. Ms. Thompson? This is Detective Chen. I have some developments in your case. I sat up straighter, my heart immediately beginning to pound. What kind of developments? We've discovered additional evidence. Evidence that changes the scope of what we're dealing with. She paused. Can you come to the station? I think you'll want to see this in person. An hour later, I was sitting across from Detective Chen in the same interview room where I had given my initial statement. She had a folder in front of her, thick, overstuffed with papers, and an expression I couldn't quite read. What did you find? I asked. She opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It was a woman, blonde, pretty, maybe mid-30s. She was smiling at the camera, her eyes bright with happiness. Do you recognize her? Detective Chen asked. I shook my head. No, should I? This is Sarah Mitchell. She was Mark's first wife. The world tilted. First wife? I heard myself say. Mark was never married before me. He told me he lied. They were married for 3 years, from 2010 to 2013. The marriage ended when she died. I stared at the photograph of this smiling woman, this woman who had been Mark's wife before me, and felt ice forming in my veins. How did she die? Detective Chen's expression was grim. Heart attack. She was 32 years old, in perfect health. It was ruled natural causes at the time. She paused. Her husband was the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy. $2 million. The room spun. I'm saying we've reopened the investigation into Sarah Mitchell's death. And what we're finding suggests that your case wasn't Mark's first attempt at this particular scheme. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Mark had done this before. He had married a woman, taken out an insurance policy on her life, and killed her. He had gotten away with it. And then years later, he had found me. Another target, another mark, another victim. There's more, Detective Chen continued, her voice gentle but inexorable. After Sarah died, Mark moved to Philadelphia. There, he was briefly engaged to a woman named Rebecca Torres. The engagement ended when Rebecca survived a car accident. Her brakes had been tampered with. She was too shaken to pursue an investigation at the time, but when we contacted her last week, she was very interested in talking to us. Rebecca, Sarah, and me. 3 women. At least 3 that they knew of. How many others? I whispered. How many women has he done this to? We don't know yet. We're still investigating. But Chloe, she leaned forward, her eyes holding mine. You need to understand something. You're the first one who figured it out. You're the first one who fought back. You're the only reason we know any of this. I thought about Sarah Mitchell, dead at 32. Her murder ruled a heart attack. I thought about Rebecca Torres, surviving by luck when her brakes failed. I thought about all the women Mark might have targeted, might have charmed, might have destroyed. I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, trusting, naive, completely in love with a monster. If I hadn't hidden in that closet, if Jessica's phone hadn't been on speaker, if I had drunk the champagne before I heard the truth, I would be dead. And Mark would be free to do it again. What happens now, I asked. Now we build the case, not just for attempted murder, but for the murder of Sarah Mitchell. If we can prove that Mark killed before, it changes everything. It's no longer an isolated incident, it's a pattern, a life of predation. The prosecution will push for the maximum sentence, and the jury will see him for what he truly is. A serial killer, I said. The words felt unreal in my mouth. Yes, Detective Chen confirmed. That's exactly what he is. I walked out of the police station in a daze. Sarah Mitchell, a woman I had never met, would never meet. A woman who had trusted Mark the way I had trusted him, who had probably believed his declarations of love just as completely. A woman who had died alone, never knowing that her husband was a murderer. I had to do something. I couldn't just go home and sit with this knowledge, letting it fester. I called Patricia. I need to help, I told her. Whatever the investigation needs, testimony, documents, access to our finances, I'll provide it. I want to make sure Mark pays for everything he's done. Not just to me, but to Sarah, to Rebecca, to anyone else he's hurt. Chloe, you've already done more than most victims ever do. You don't have to. Yes, I do. My voice was sharp, certain. Sarah Mitchell doesn't have a voice anymore. Mark took that from her. But I'm still here. I can speak for her. I can make sure her death wasn't in vain. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, All right, let's talk about what you can do. Over the next few months, I became an active partner in building the case against Mark. I spent hours with the forensic accountants, tracing the web of shell companies and offshore accounts Mark had used to hide his stolen money. I dug through boxes of old files from our marriage, finding documents that supported the timeline of his fraud. I even tracked down former clients of his investment firm who had suspected something was wrong but hadn't known what. The picture that emerged was damning. Mark had been running his scheme for over a decade. It had started before he met Sarah. Small-time cons, petty thefts, nothing that ever quite rose to the level of serious prosecution. But when he married Sarah, something changed. He had found his true calling, marriage as the ultimate con. Marry a woman, isolate her from her support network, take out insurance. And when the time was right, collect. Sarah had been worth $2 million. Rebecca's policy, if she had died in that car accident, would have paid out $3 million. And me? $5 million. Plus the assets from Mark's firm, which he had built on money I had helped him raise. Plus the house, the cars, the investments. I was his biggest score, his masterpiece. And I had ruined everything by hiding in a closet. No. Patricia said to me one evening as we reviewed documents in her office. Most people in your situation would fall apart. The trauma of what you've been through, compounded by learning that your husband was a serial predator, it would break most people. I'm broken, I admitted. In ways I'm still discovering. But I can't afford to stay broken. Not until this is over. What keeps you going? I thought about it. Sarah Mitchell. Every time I want to give up, I think about her. She was 32 years old. She probably thought she had her whole life ahead of her. And Mark took that away, and no one knew. No one held him accountable. I looked at Patricia. I survived because of luck and circumstance. Sarah didn't get that chance. The least I can do is make sure her death means something. Patricia nodded slowly. That's a heavy burden to carry. It's the right burden. I picked up another file. What else do we need to go through? 2 weeks before the trial was set to begin, Mark's lawyers made a motion to dismiss the charges related to Sarah Mitchell's death. Insufficient evidence, they argued. Speculation and conjecture. The state cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Thompson was responsible for his first wife's tragic death. The hearing was tense. I sat in the gallery watching Mark's legal team argue that the pattern of behavior we had uncovered was coincidental, and that Sarah's death had been thoroughly investigated and found to be natural. That reopening a closed case based on new accusations was legally questionable, but the prosecution was ready. They presented testimony from the forensic toxicologist who had analyzed samples preserved from Sarah's autopsy. The original medical examiner had tested for common poisons and found nothing. But modern technology was more sensitive, more sophisticated. And when they tested for GHB variants, the same class of drug that had been found in the champagne meant for me, they found traces in Sarah's tissue samples. The same drug, the same method. Mark had killed Sarah exactly the way he had tried to kill me. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, this is not speculation. This is science. Mark Thompson has been using the same poison for over a decade. He perfected his technique on Sarah Mitchell, and he tried to use it again on Chloe Thompson. The only difference is that Chloe survived to tell the tale. The judge denied the motion to dismiss. Mark was going to stand trial for murder. I walked out of the courthouse that day feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. It wasn't over yet. The trial would be difficult, brutal, exhausting. Mark's lawyers would fight tooth and nail, trying to create reasonable doubt, trying to undermine our evidence, trying to paint me as an unreliable witness with an axe to grind. But for the first time, I truly believed we were going to win. Mark was going to pay for what he did to me, for what he did to Sarah, for what he would have done to countless other women if I hadn't stopped him. The night before the trial began, I visited Sarah Mitchell's grave. I had tracked down the location through public records, a small cemetery in Connecticut where Sarah's parents had buried her close to their family plot. The headstone was simple: Sarah Mitchell Thompson, beloved daughter and wife, 1981, 2013. I stood there for a long time, looking at the stone, thinking about the woman beneath it. We had never met, but we were connected in the most intimate way possible. We had both loved Mark Thompson. We had both trusted him with our lives. And we had both paid the price. She with her life, and I with everything I had believed about love and safety and trust. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass. But I'm going to get justice for you, I continued. I promise. Mark is never going to hurt anyone again. I laid the flowers I had brought, white roses, simple and pure, at the base of the headstone. Then I turned and walked away. Tomorrow, the trial would begin, and I was ready. The first day of the trial was overwhelming. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, spectators, true crime enthusiasts who had followed the story since Mark's arrest. Camera crews set up outside, and I had to push through a gauntlet of microphones and shouted questions to reach the entrance. Mrs. Thompson, how do you feel about facing your husband in court? Chloe, Do you believe justice will be served? Is it true that Mark killed his first wife? I ignored them all, keeping my eyes fixed straight ahead, my face expressionless. Patricia had prepared me for this. Don't engage, she had said. Don't give them anything to use. Your story will be told in the courtroom, where it matters. Inside, I took my seat in the gallery, surrounded by my family. My father sat on my right, my mother on my left, my sister directly behind me. Their presence was a bulwark against the chaos, a reminder that I wasn't alone. Mark was led in by bailiffs, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him, his face drawn and pale. Prison hadn't been kind. Good. He didn't look at me. Not once. I wondered if that was strategy, his lawyers telling him to avoid appearing aggressive, or if he simply couldn't face the woman who had destroyed his carefully constructed world. Either way, I was grateful not to meet his eyes. The prosecution's opening statement laid out the case in stark, devastating detail. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are here today to decide the fate of a man who has made a career out of murder. Mark Thompson didn't just try to kill his wife, Chloe. He succeeded in killing his first wife, Sarah Mitchell, 10 years ago. He has spent a decade perfecting his craft, marrying vulnerable women, isolating them, taking out life insurance policies, and then eliminating them when they become inconvenient. I watched the jury's faces as the prosecutor spoke. They were listening intently, their expressions ranging from shocked to horrified. The evidence will show you a pattern of predation stretching back over a decade. The evidence will show you a man who smiled at his wedding while plotting his bride's death. The evidence will show you that Chloe Thompson is alive today only because of chance, because she happened to be hiding in a closet when her husband's co-conspirator made a phone call. The prosecutor paused, letting the words sink in. And the evidence will show you that Sarah Mitchell, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, died in 2013 because Mark Thompson decided she was worth more to him dead than alive. The defense's opening was what I expected: denial, deflection, alternative theories. Mark's attorney painted me as a bitter, vindictive woman who had discovered her husband's affair and decided to frame him for murder. He suggested that Jessica was the true mastermind, that she had manipulated Mark into the scheme and was now lying to save herself. He even floated the theory that I had somehow obtained the poison myself and staged the entire incident. It was absurd, insulting. And I could tell from the jury's expressions that they weren't buying it. But the defense didn't need to convince the jury that I was lying. They just needed to create reasonable doubt. That was the game we were playing. And the stakes couldn't have been higher. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of testimony, of evidence, of witnesses. 3 weeks of my life laid bare in public, every intimate detail of my marriage examined and analyzed. 3 weeks of sitting in that gallery, watching Mark's lawyers try to destroy my credibility while Patricia fought back with truth and evidence. The forensic evidence was damning. The toxicologist explained how the poison worked, how it had been found in both the champagne and in Sarah's preserved tissue samples. The digital forensics expert traced the online purchase of the poison to an account controlled by Mark. The financial analyst laid out the web of fraud and embezzlement in excruciating detail. And then there were the witnesses. Jessica testified, confirming every detail of the murder plot. She was pale and thin, visibly scared, but she didn't waver. She told the jury exactly how Mark had recruited her, how he had convinced her that I was the obstacle to their happiness, how they had planned my death together. "Did you love him?" the prosecutor asked. "I thought I did," Jessica said, her voice barely audible. "But I don't think Mark is capable of being loved. Not really. He just uses people until he doesn't need them anymore." Rebecca Torres testified via video link from Philadelphia. She told the jury about her engagement to Mark, about the car accident that had nearly killed her, about the fear she had lived with for years. "I always knew something was wrong," she said. "I just couldn't prove it. When the police called me about this case, I finally understood. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was a target who got lucky. And then it was my turn. I took the stand on the 15th day of the trial. Patricia had prepared me extensively. We had rehearsed my testimony, anticipated the cross-examination, practiced maintaining my composure under pressure. But nothing could have truly prepared me for the experience of sitting in that witness box, facing the man who had tried to kill me, and telling my story to 12 strangers who held his fate in their hands. I told them about the closet, about the phone call, about the champagne, about the terror of realizing that my husband was planning my death. I told them about finding the evidence, about the insurance policy, the plane tickets, the emails, about building a case against the man I had loved, and I told them about Sarah Mitchell. I never knew her, I said, my voice steady despite the tears that pricked at my eyes. But in some ways, I feel like I know her better than almost anyone, because we shared the same experience. We fell in love with the same man. We trusted him with our lives, and he betrayed us both. I looked directly at the jury. The only difference between me and Sarah is luck. I happened to be in the right place at the right time to overhear the truth. She wasn't, and now she's dead. And I'm here to speak for her. The defense's cross-examination was brutal. Mark's lawyer attacked every aspect of my testimony, questioning my memory, my motives, my mental state. He suggested I was unstable, that I had imagined the phone call, that I had planted the evidence. He tried to make me angry, tried to make me contradict myself, tried to get me to slip up, but I didn't. Every attack, I met with calm, clear responses. Every insinuation, I countered with facts. And when he pushed too hard, I pushed back. Mr. Reeves, are you suggesting that I poisoned my own champagne? I'm suggesting that your story has inconsistencies. The champagne was tested by a forensic toxicologist. The poison was confirmed. Are you suggesting that the crime lab fabricated evidence? Are you suggesting that I somehow obtained a rare pharmaceutical compound, staged an elaborate scene, and risked my own life just to frame my husband? Is that your theory? He had no answer to that. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I felt like I had run a marathon. But I had done it. I had told my truth, and I hadn't let them break me. Now, it was in the jury's hands. The jury deliberated for 4 days. 4 days of waiting. 4 days of pacing my apartment, checking my phone every 5 minutes, trying to distract myself with work that I couldn't focus on. 4 days of my family taking shifts to stay with me, making sure I slept, making sure I didn't spiral into the anxiety that threatened to swallow me whole. What if they didn't convict? The thought kept me up at night. Despite all the evidence, despite the testimony, despite everything. What if the jury believed Mark's lawyers? What if they found reasonable doubt? What if Mark walked free? He would come for me. I knew it in my bones. If he was acquitted, if he was released, he would find a way to finish what he had started. Not immediately. He was too smart for that. But eventually, when the attention had died down, when everyone had moved on to the next scandal, he would come for his revenge. I wouldn't survive a second time. The jury's been out too long, I told Patricia on the 3rd day. What does that mean? It means they're being thorough, she said, her voice calm and reassuring. This is a complicated case with multiple charges. They want to make sure they get it right. Or it means they're deadlocked. It means there's someone on that jury who believes him. Chloe, Patricia took my hands in hers. You've done everything you can. You've told the truth. You've provided the evidence. Now you need to trust the process. I trusted Mark for 5 years. Look where that got me. She didn't have an answer for that. On the morning of the 4th day, my phone rang. They're back, Patricia said. The verdict will be read in 2 hours. I don't remember getting dressed. I don't remember the drive to the courthouse. I don't remember pushing through the crowd of reporters and spectators. I only remember sitting in that gallery, surrounded by my family, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Mark was let in. He looked haggard, his suit slightly wrinkled, his face gray. For a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked so small, so diminished, nothing like the confident, charming man I had married. Then I remembered Sarah Mitchell. I remembered the champagne. I remembered what he had planned to do to me. And the pity vanished. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge, Patricia Morrison presiding." The judge took her seat and called the court to order. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." The slip of paper was passed to the judge, who read it silently, her face betraying nothing. Then she handed it to the clerk. "The defendant will please rise." Mark stood, his lawyer beside him. I watched his face, searching for any sign of what he was thinking, what he was feeling, but he was blank, controlled, revealing nothing. "On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, how does the jury find?" The foreman's voice was clear and steady. "We find the defendant guilty." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. My mother grabbed my hand and squeezed. "On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, how does the jury find?" "Guilty." "On the count of murder in the first degree, in the death of Sarah Mitchell, how does the jury find?" This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. Sarah's justice, my justice, the end of Mark's reign of terror. "Guilty." The word hit me like a physical force. I felt tears streaming down my face. I hadn't even realized I was crying. My father put his arm around me. My sister was sobbing openly. And somewhere behind me, I heard someone cheer before being shushed by the bailiff. The clerk continued reading the verdicts. Guilty on the fraud charges. Guilty on the embezzlement charges. Guilty on everything. Mark stood motionless as the litany of his crimes was confirmed, one by one. His face was still blank, but I saw something in his posture change. A slight slump of the shoulders, a bowing of the head. The realization finally sinking in that it was over. He had lost. We had won. "The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing," the judge announced. "Court is adjourned." As the bailiffs moved to take Mark away, he finally looked at me. Our eyes met across the courtroom, the first time we had truly looked at each other since that night in our living room, when I had thrown wine in his face and run for my life. He smiled. It was a small, bitter smile, but there was something in it that chilled me. Something that said this wasn't over. Not really. Not for him. Something that promised, even in defeat, that he would never stop hating me, never stop blaming me for his downfall. I held his gaze until the bailiffs led him away, and I made myself a silent promise. I would never let him see me afraid again. The sentencing hearing was 3 weeks later. Mark's lawyer made the expected arguments: his client's previously clean record, his contributions to the community, the potential for rehabilitation. He asked for the minimum sentence, suggested that Mark had been led astray by Jessica, that he was capable of redemption if given the chance. The prosecution asked for the maximum: life without parole. I was given the opportunity to make a victim impact statement. I stood at the podium, facing Mark, facing the judge, facing the packed courtroom. I had spent days writing and rewriting my statement, trying to find the words that would capture what this experience had been: the terror, the betrayal, the long road to recovery. In the end, I spoke from the heart. "Your Honor, a year ago I was a happy wife. I believed I was in a loving marriage with a devoted husband. I trusted Mark Thompson with my life, literally. And that trust almost killed me." I looked directly at Mark. "When I hid in that closet to surprise you on our anniversary, I thought I knew who you were. I thought I knew our story. But I was just a character in a narrative you had created, a mark, a target, a means to an end. You never loved me. You never saw me as a person. I was just insurance money waiting to be collected." Mark's expression didn't change. He watched me with the same blank, controlled face he had worn throughout the trial. "But I survived," I continued. "And in surviving, I learned something that Sarah Mitchell never got the chance to learn. Who you really are. A predator, a con artist, a murderer." I turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I'm not asking for vengeance. I'm asking for justice. Not just for me, but for Sarah Mitchell, who was 32 years old when Mark Thompson killed her. For Rebecca Torres, who survived a murder attempt because of luck. And for all the women who might have become his victims in the future if he had not been stopped. I took a breath. Mark Thompson doesn't deserve redemption. He doesn't deserve the chance to hurt anyone else. He deserves to spend the rest of his life in a cell, remembering every woman he tried to destroy, knowing that in the end, we won. I sat down. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. I had said what I needed to say. The judge considered for a long moment. "Mr. Thompson," she said finally, "in my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many criminals, thieves, fraudsters, even killers. But I have rarely seen a pattern of predation as cold, as calculated, and as utterly remorseless as yours." Mark's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "You targeted vulnerable women. You charmed them, married them, isolated them from their support systems. And when they had served their purpose, you killed them. Not in passion, not in anger, but with the cold calculation of a business transaction." She leaned forward. Sarah Mitchell was 32 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. And you took that from her for $2 million. Chloe Thompson is here today only because of extraordinary luck and extraordinary courage. How many others might there have been if you had not been stopped? How many women are alive today because Chloe happened to hide in that closet? The courtroom was absolutely silent. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Sarah Mitchell. Additionally, you will serve 25 years for the attempted murder of Chloe Thompson, to run consecutively. On the charges of fraud and embezzlement, you will serve an additional 15 years, also consecutive. She looked at Mark. "You will die in prison, Mr. Thompson, and perhaps in that time, you will finally understand the gravity of what you have done. Life without parole." The words echoed in my mind as the courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors, eager to file their stories. My family surrounded me, hugging me, crying with relief. Patricia shook my hand with a smile that said, we had done it, we had won. But I barely registered any of it. I just kept thinking, he will die in prison. He will never hurt anyone again. Sarah had been avenged. I had been protected. And Mark, the monster who had hidden behind a charming smile, would never see freedom again. It was over. Really, truly over. The weeks after the sentencing were strange. I had spent so long fighting, gathering evidence, and preparing testimony, anticipating attacks, that I didn't know what to do with myself when there was nothing left to fight for. The adrenaline that had kept me going drained away, and in its place was a profound exhaustion. I slept a lot, 12 hours a night sometimes, my body finally catching up on all the rest it had been denied. I took long walks in the park near my apartment, not thinking about anything, just letting the sunshine and fresh air work their healing magic. I continued seeing Dr. Warren, processing the trauma in small, manageable pieces. Some sessions I cried, some sessions I raged, some sessions I just sat in silence, unable to find words for what I was feeling. "You're grieving," Dr. Warren told me one day, "not just for the marriage or for the life you thought you had. You're grieving for the person you were before this happened. That woman, the trusting, optimistic woman who believed the best in people, she's gone, and it's okay to mourn her." "What do I become now?" I asked. "If that person is gone, who am I?" That's what we're here to find out. And the answer might surprise you. She was right. Over the following months, I slowly discovered the new version of myself. A woman shaped by trauma, but not defined by it. I was stronger now, warier, less likely to trust blindly. But I was also more compassionate, more attuned to the struggles of others, more willing to fight for justice. I started volunteering with a local organization that supported survivors of domestic violence and financial abuse. Many of the women I met had stories that echoed my own. Charming partners who had slowly isolated them, manipulated them, controlled every aspect of their lives. Some had escaped. Some hadn't been so lucky. I shared my story with them. I told them that survival was possible, that justice was possible, that there was life after the nightmare. Some of them cried. Some of them hugged me. One woman told me that hearing my story had given her the courage to finally leave her own abusive relationship. That made everything worth it. I also reached out to Rebecca Torres. We met for coffee in Philadelphia, two strangers connected by the worst experience of their lives. She was in her late 30s now, still bearing the scars from the car accident that had nearly killed her. We talked for hours about Mark, about survival, about moving forward. I spent years thinking I was crazy, Rebecca told me. Everyone said the accident was just bad luck, worn brake lines, mechanical failure. But I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't prove it. You weren't crazy, I said. You were right, and now everyone knows it. She smiled, a genuine smile, the smile of someone who had finally been vindicated. Thank you, she said, for believing me, for fighting, for making sure he could never do this to anyone else. Thank you for surviving, I replied. If you hadn't, I might never have known the full scope of what he was. We exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch. Another connection forged from trauma, another strand in the web of support that was slowly replacing the isolation Mark had created. And then there was Sarah. I couldn't talk to Sarah, couldn't share my story with her, couldn't give her the closure she deserved. But I could honor her memory in other ways. I worked with her family to establish the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of insurance fraud and domestic violence. We funded legal aid for women trying to escape abusive relationships. We lobbied for better investigation protocols when spouses died under suspicious circumstances. We raised awareness about the warning signs of financial predators. Sarah's parents became like family to me. They had spent 10 years believing their daughter had died of natural causes, never knowing the truth. When the full story came out, they had been devastated, but also grateful. At least we know now, her mother told me. At least we know what really happened. And at least he's paying for it. That was the gift I could give them, the gift of truth, the gift of justice. 1 year after the verdict, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, preparing for a date. It was my first date since Mark. A colleague from work had been asking for months, and I had finally said yes. He was kind, funny, patient, everything Mark had pretended to be. But he wasn't pretending. I could tell the difference now. I looked at my reflection. The woman staring back at me was not the same woman who had hidden in a closet a year and a half ago. She was harder, yes, more guarded. But she was also more alive, more present, more herself. I thought about how far I had come. From the terrified woman who had heard her husband plan her murder, to the warrior who had brought him down, to the survivor who was finally learning to live again. It hadn't been easy. There were still nightmares, still moments of panic when someone came up behind me too quickly, still days when the weight of everything that had happened felt crushing. But I was healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but truly. And I was ready to try again. Not with the blind trust I had given Mark, never again with that kind of naivety. But with cautious hope, with open eyes, with the knowledge that I was strong enough to survive whatever came next. My phone buzzed. A text from my date. Running 5 minutes late. Save you a seat? I smiled. See you soon, I typed back. Then I grabbed my purse and walked out the door. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was a beautiful evening, the kind of evening that used to make me think of romance and forever, and all the promises Mark had made and broken. Now, it just made me think of possibility. The future was uncertain. I didn't know where this date would lead, or the next one, or the one after that. I didn't know if I would ever fully trust someone again, ever open myself up to the vulnerability that love required. But I knew one thing for certain. I was alive, and I was never going to take that for granted again. As I drove to meet my date, I passed by the street where I used to live with Mark. The house was still there, dark and empty now, waiting to be sold. I had never gone back after that night. Patricia had arranged for movers to pack my things, and the house had been on the market ever since. I slowed down, looking at the windows, the driveway, the front door where I had once stood with a stranger who called himself my husband. For a moment, I felt the ghost of old fear, the memory of champagne bubbles and deadly doses and a smile that had hidden murder. Then I drove on. The past was behind me. Mark was in prison, where he would spend the rest of his life. Jessica was serving her own sentence. Shorter, but significant. And I was free. Free to build a new life. Free to find new love, if I wanted it. Free to be whoever I wanted to be. I pulled into the restaurant parking lot and checked my reflection one last time. My eyes were clear, my smile genuine. I looked like a woman ready for a new beginning. And that's exactly what I was. 2 years later, I stood in a courtroom again. But this time, I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a witness. I wasn't even a spectator. I was the one being sworn in. Do you solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and to faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which you are about to enter? I do, I said. And just like that, I became Chloe Mitchell. I had taken Sarah's maiden name in her honor, licensed attorney, and newly appointed director of the state's Victim Advocacy Unit. The irony wasn't lost on me. 4 years ago, I had been a marketing executive who thought law was boring. 3 years ago, I had been the victim of an attempted murder who needed lawyers to save her life. And now, I was the lawyer who would save others. The journey had been unexpected. After the trial, after the healing, after I had started to find my footing again, I realized that my volunteer work wasn't enough. I wanted to do more. I needed to do more. The system that had ultimately saved me was also a system that failed countless others. Women who couldn't afford lawyers, who didn't have families to support them, who slipped through the cracks and ended up like Sarah Mitchell. I wanted to change that. So at 32 years old, with a career in marketing behind me and a lifetime of trauma ahead of me, I went back to school. Law school. 3 years of contracts and torts and constitutional law, of late nights and early mornings, of pushing myself harder than I had ever pushed in my life. My classmates were mostly in their 20s, fresh-faced and optimistic, still believing that the system worked the way it was supposed to. I was the old lady of the class, the one with the dark circles under her eyes and the haunted look that came from knowing too much about how the world really worked. But I was also the most motivated student in the room. Every case we studied, I saw through the lens of my own experience. Every legal principle we learned, I evaluated based on how it could help or fail someone like me, someone like Sarah, someone like the hundreds of thousands of victims who needed advocates and didn't have them. I graduated top of my class. And then I turned down every lucrative private sector offer to take a position that paid a quarter of what I could have made. Because this was never about money for me. This was about purpose. The Victim Advocacy Unit was a small department within the state's Attorney General's office, underfunded and overworked, with a mandate to help victims navigate the criminal justice system. Most of my colleagues had been doing this work for years, burned out but committed, trying to make a difference with limited resources. I was determined to change that. Within 6 months, I had secured a major grant to expand the department. Within a year, I had doubled the number of advocates and established partnerships with local shelters and nonprofits. Within 2 years, the unit had become a model for other states, a proof of concept that victim advocacy could be more than an afterthought. And now, I was the director. "Congratulations, counselor," my father said, hugging me after the swearing-in ceremony. "I always knew you'd do something amazing." "I didn't," I admitted. "But life has a way of surprising you." My mother was crying. Happy tears this time, not the terrified tears of 3 years ago. My sister was taking pictures. And David, the colleague who had become my partner, stood in the back of the room with a smile that said he was proud beyond words. We had been together for a year and a half now. He was nothing like Mark, quiet where Mark had been flashy, steady where Mark had been unpredictable. genuinely kind where Mark had only pretended. He knew everything about my past, every terrible detail, and he loved me anyway. More importantly, he respected my independence. He never tried to isolate me, never questioned my choices, never made me feel like I needed his approval to exist. He was a partner in the truest sense. Someone who walked beside me, not someone who tried to control my path. "Ready to change the world?" he asked, taking my hand after the ceremony. "I don't know about the world," I said, "but I'm ready to change a few lives." The first case that crossed my desk as director was heartbreakingly familiar. A young woman named Ashley had been married for 3 years to a man who controlled every aspect of her life. He had isolated her from her family, taken control of her finances, and recently had been making comments about how much she was worth if something were to happen to her. She had found my story online and recognized the pattern. I met with her personally, sitting across from her in my office, watching her twist her wedding ring nervously as she told me what she suspected. "He's been asking about life insurance," Ashley said, "and he's been really interested in my medical history, like whether I have any heart conditions in my family. It's creepy. It feels like he's researching." "Have you told anyone else?" I asked. "Just my sister. But she thinks I'm being paranoid. She says Derek is such a nice guy. He would never hurt me." Ashley laughed bitterly. "That's what everyone says, right? He's so charming. He's so perfect. Who would believe me?" "I believe you," I said. Her eyes widened, filling with tears. "You do? I know exactly what you're going through. I lived it myself." I leaned forward. "And I'm going to help you." Over the next few months, I worked with Ashley to build an escape plan. We documented Derek's controlling behavior. We set up a secret bank account where she could save money. We connected her with a shelter that would take her in when she was ready to leave. We prepared for every contingency, every potential attack, every way he might try to prevent her from getting away. And when the time was right, we acted. Ashley left Derek on a Tuesday morning while he was at work. She took only what she could carry, walked out of the house, and never looked back. Within hours, she was safe at the shelter, surrounded by advocates who would help her rebuild her life. Derek tried to find her, of course. He called her sister, showed up at her workplace, even filed a missing persons report. But Ashley was protected now, legally, physically, emotionally. And when Derek's behavior became more erratic, when he started making threats, we had documentation, evidence, a case. He was arrested 6 months later for stalking and harassment. During the investigation, police found life insurance policies on Ashley worth over $1 million. They found internet searches for undetectable poisons and how to stage an accident. They found a pattern that looked chillingly similar to Mark's. He was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. And Ashley testified against him. "You saved my life," she told me after his conviction. "If I hadn't found your story, if you hadn't believed me." "You saved your own life," I said. "You were brave enough to recognize the danger and smart enough to get out. I just helped." "You did more than help." She hugged me tightly. "You gave me hope. You showed me that there's life after the nightmare." That was what I did now. That was my purpose. Showing other women that there was life after the nightmare. Not all of my cases had happy endings. Some women couldn't leave. Some didn't survive. Some made it out but were so broken that recovery seemed impossible. The work was hard, emotionally draining, sometimes devastating. But for every loss, there was a victory. A woman who escaped. A predator who was caught. A life that was saved. And every victory made the losses more bearable. On the 5th anniversary of the night I hid in the closet, I did something I had never done before. I visited Mark in prison. I hadn't seen him since the sentencing. I had deliberately avoided any contact, any reminder of the monster who had shared my bed and plotted my death. But something had shifted in me over the past year, a growing sense that I needed closure, real closure, the kind that could only come from facing him one last time. The prison was exactly what you would expect. Gray, cold, institutional. I passed through security, surrendered my belongings, and was led to a visiting room with bulletproof glass and phones on either side. Mark was waiting for me. He looked old. That was my first thought. The charming, handsome man I had married was gone, replaced by a gray-skinned, hollow-eyed inmate in orange. Prison had not been kind to him. Good. I picked up the phone. He did the same. Chloe. His voice was raspy, like he didn't talk much anymore. I didn't expect you to ever come here. Neither did I. We looked at each other through the glass. The last time we had been this close, he had kissed me goodnight while planning my murder. Why are you here? He asked. I wanted to see you, to see what you've become, to remind myself that justice exists. He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Justice, is that what you call this? Spending the rest of my life in a cage? That's exactly what I call it. You killed Sarah Mitchell. You tried to kill me. You spent your entire life preying on women who trusted you. This is exactly what you deserve. I never meant to hurt you. He leaned forward, his eyes still trying to find that old charm, that old manipulation. I loved you, Chloe. In my own way, I really did. You loved what I could do for you. You loved my money, my connections, my usefulness. You never loved me. That's not true. Mark, I cut him off, my voice cold. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to tell you something. He fell silent, waiting. I'm happy now. I have a life, a career, a partner who actually loves me. I've helped dozens of women escape situations like ours. I've put away predators like you. Everything you tried to take from me, my future, my hope, my faith in people, I've rebuilt it, stronger than before. I watched his face as the words sank in. I saw the flicker of anger, the frustration of a man who had spent his life controlling others and now had no control left. You thought you were going to destroy me, I continued. You thought you were going to collect your insurance money and start a new life while I rotted in the ground. But instead, you're the one rotting. You're the one who will die in here, alone and forgotten. And I'm the one who's free. Is that why you came? He sneered. To gloat? No, I came to say goodbye. I stood up, still holding the phone. I'm never going to think about you again after today. You're going to fade from my memory like the bad dream you always were. And 20 years from now, when you're still in this cage and I'm living my best life, you'll know that I won. Completely and absolutely. I won. I hung up the phone. Mark said something. I could see his lips moving, but I couldn't hear him through the glass. I turned and walked away, not looking back. When I stepped outside into the sunshine, I felt like I had shed a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying. The last invisible chain connecting me to Mark Thompson was broken. I was truly free. That evening, David took me to the restaurant where we had our first date. The same table, the same sunset view, the same sense of possibility I had felt that night 2 years ago. How do you feel? He asked, taking my hand across the table. Complete, I said. For the first time since this all started, I feel complete. He smiled. I have something for you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. Chloe, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, beautiful diamond ring. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You've been through hell, and you came out the other side more compassionate, more driven, more amazing than ever. I fall more in love with you every single day. Tears were streaming down my face. Happy tears. Healing tears. I know you've been hurt before. I know you have every reason to never trust anyone again. But I'm asking you to take one more chance, to believe that love can be real and safe and good. To let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm nothing like him. He paused, his eyes shining. Chloe Mitchell, will you marry me? And for a moment, I was back in that closet, hearing my first husband plan my death. For a moment, I felt all the old fear, all the old pain, all the reasons I should never trust anyone again. And then I looked at David, kind, patient, genuine David, who had waited for me to heal, who had never pushed, who had simply loved me and let me find my way back to myself. I thought about what Dr. Warren had said all those years ago, you're grieving for the person you were before. And the answer to who you become might surprise you. I had become someone I never expected. A lawyer, a director, a survivor, A woman who turned her trauma into purpose. And now I was about to become something else. A woman who chose to love again, despite everything. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll marry you. David slipped the ring onto my finger and we kissed while the sun set outside the window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new chapter was beginning. And this time, I knew exactly who I was marrying. The night before my wedding, my real wedding, my healthy wedding, my wedding to a man who actually loved me, I sat alone in my apartment and looked at the invitation in my hands. Chloe Mitchell and David Chen request the pleasure of your company. Mitchell. I had kept Sarah's name, even now. A reminder of the woman who had died so that I could live. A promise that her story would never be forgotten. I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The closet, the champagne, the trial, the healing, the work, the love. 5 years ago, I had been a naive woman hiding in a closet with rose petals and champagne, waiting to surprise a husband who was planning to kill me. Now I was a survivor, a fighter, a director of victim advocacy, a bride. I had built a life from the ashes of the one Mark had tried to destroy. I had found purpose in pain, meaning in suffering, hope in the darkness. And tomorrow I was going to marry a man who saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. I picked up a glass of water and raised it to the empty room. Happy anniversary to me, I said softly. The gift was my life back. Outside, the night was peaceful. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in a prison hundreds of miles away, Mark Thompson was serving the first of many decades in a cell. But I wasn't thinking about him anymore. I was thinking about tomorrow, about David, about the future we were going to build together. I was thinking about all the women I would help, all the lives I would save, all the justice I would fight for. And I was thinking about Sarah, beautiful, trusting Sarah, who had been murdered by the same man who had tried to murder me. She would have been 43 now, maybe married, maybe a mother, maybe living the life that had been stolen from her. I couldn't give her back her life, but I could honor it. Every day, with every case, with every victim I helped, I could honor the memory of a woman I had never met but would never forget. This is for you, Sarah, I whispered. All of it. Everything I am now, it's for you. I finished my water, set down the glass, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I would marry David. Tomorrow, I would begin the next chapter of my life. And this time, I knew exactly how the story would go. Because this time, I was the one writing it.